Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the meeting, the Standards Committee. It's Thursday, the 28th of October. It's 2 o'clock. The meeting is being held remotely via Microsoft Teams due to restrictions in relation to COVID-19. My name is David Lewis. I'll be chairing the meeting today. I'll start by asking Mr. Robert Tranter to confirm the proceedings for this particular meeting.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it's lovely to see Standards Committee here this afternoon. I think it's our first meeting since the beginning of last year. So it's lovely to see you all, and I hope you've all been keeping well. Just a couple of notes, please, if I could just make these. The first time that you speak to the camera, could you just introduce yourself, just for those who are watching the recording this afternoon? It'll be very useful if you say just who you are. So, for example, if you could say, I'm Mr. Card, lay member, etc., etc. So if we could do that, that would be fantastic. So I'm just going to make some notes now. So as I've said, this meeting is being recorded and will be made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. There are none on the agenda this afternoon. Therefore, the images, audio of those individuals present and or speaking will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council website at www.caerphilly.gov.uk. Please can I remind members and attendees that if they lose connection during the meeting, please make every attempt to reconnect. We have officers here who can help with that. However, the meeting will continue as long as the meeting is quorate. Committee services are on hand and will be able to assist you to reconnect if necessary. Please can we ask everyone to keep their microphones on mute until they are invited to speak. And if you wish to speak, please use the hands up function in Microsoft Teams or raise your hand. Preferably, could we use that hands up function? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tranter. To start then, are there any apologies for absence you know about?
Councillor Colin Mann, Chair, sends his apologies. They're noted in the meeting chat.
So Councillor Mann, and that's it. Right, a very important announcement now. Number 2, declaration of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and or prejudicial interest in respect of any items of business on this agenda, in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Please use the hands up function or raise your hands to indicate if you have any such declarations. No declarations of interest. Thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item number 3. That's to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Can I just check that everyone's got a copy of the minutes, those who need them? Everyone's been sent or has a copy? Good. Well, if we go through it fairly quickly, page by page, the meeting was held on the 27th of January last year, so it's been quite a while. Page 1, welcome, Chair, Vice Chair, apologies, etc. Page 2, declarations of interest. There weren't any. And the minutes of the previous meeting were approved. There were reports of officers. These were quite lengthy. I hope you all had a chance to read through it. That's page 2. Page 3. And page 4, the last page, was the meeting finished with a code of conduct training. Before we pass on, does anyone have any comments or questions they'd like to make on the minutes of the last meeting? No. Then is it the wish of the meeting that I sign this as a true record? If we could have a show of hands or hands up. Everyone in agreement? Yep, thank you very much. So the minutes will be signed by me soon. Right, item number 4. The Public Service Ombudsman for Wales Annual Letter. And Lisa Lane will present us the report. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if Mr. Card has a question to ask before I start the report.
Yes, I do. Thank you. John Card, lay member. Just 2 items. I believe it was Councillor Gale who commented on the lengthy time taken to respond and apologise to the complainant in the case that we discussed. And it appeared to be a recurring matter from the comments. I'm sure she would have raised it if she was here again. Second point was the case discussed was close to the expiry date of the timescale set by the Ombudsman. And I asked the question as to whether the Ombudsman was satisfied with the Council's progress. The procedure for closure is explained in the Ombudsman's fact sheet titled Recommendations and Compliance. And it states if the Ombudsman is satisfied the recommendations have been met, a letter will be sent to the complainant and the body confirming that the action taken meets the recommendations and that the matter is now closed. So there appears to be a proper mechanism in place that should be reported to us. It seems to be a straightforward indicator of how the Council is addressing the recommendations that it was agreed to undertake. That's my point on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Card. Do we have a response to Mr. Card's comment? Mr. Trant, I wonder if there's anything coming?
Yeah, I think the response was sent, and as far as I'm aware, we've had no feedback from that, no negative feedback, if you like. So the actions that we said we would do, that the Council said it would do, have been done. So yes, I think that matter is now concluded. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trant. It is an important point. Can we check if it has been done completely to satisfaction?
We can do that, Chair. Yes, we can do that. And if there's an issue, I will get in touch with you if that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Trant. Any further comments that anyone would like to make on the minutes? Right, we'll move on then to the next item on the agenda, and that's Lisa's report.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to advise the committee of the publication of the annual letter from the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales for the period 2020-21. Members will note from the report that the Ombudsman issues an annual letter to each authority in Wales every year and sets out a summary of all complaints received and investigated by his office. The letter issued in respect to Caerphilly is attached to Appendix 1 to the report. Members will note in the covering letter that the Ombudsman has intervened in general, which means upheld, settled or resolved at an early stage the same proportion of complaints about public bodies compared with 2019-2020, which is 20%. The overall number of new complaints regarding local authorities decreased by 12.5% compared with last year, which reflects the reduction in complaints being reported during the COVID-19 pandemic. Members will note, however, that a higher proportion of code of conduct complaints were referred to a standards committee or the adjudication panel for Wales, that being a figure of 3.4% compared to 2% in the previous year. Members will note that the Ombudsman's letter refers to own initiative investigations in relation to homelessness assessments, which has been reported now on the Ombudsman's website. The Ombudsman has also issued 2 new publications which are detailed in the report, one named Our Findings and then an Equalities report. Members will also note that local authorities have submitted their data about the complaints they handle, and this data has been published for the first quarter of 2021-22 on the Public Services Ombudsman's website. Looking at the annual letter and the data for Caerphilly in relation to the period 2021, members will note that the data is self-explanatory. The Ombudsman received 46 complaints relating to Caerphilly compared to 49 last year, and the sectors where those complaints were received is listed in the covering report. Members will note out of those complaints, 3 referrals required early resolution or voluntary settlement. The annual letter also includes a summary of code of conduct complaints relating to members of this council and town and community councils. And in relation to code of conduct complaints for Caerphilly, members will note that 2 were discontinued. There was no evidence of a breach in respect of 1 matter, and 1 was referred to the adjudication panel for Wales. In addition, there was 1 referral relating to Bedwas, Tre Thomas and Machen Community Council, where there was no evidence of a breach. Members will note from the annual letter that the Ombudsman has asked the Council to take the following actions. The first is to present the annual letter to Cabinet, and the second is to engage with the Ombudsman's complaint standards work, access training for staff and provide complaints data. In relation to this Council, the process for considering the annual letter is for the Standards Committee and full Council to consider it, so that all members are given the ability to review the referrals to the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales. In relation to the Complaints Standards Authority, complaints officers from Caerphilly Council undertook training last year, and this has been rolled out since to staff across all directorates, with 4 training sessions being held in October, with approximately 80 officers attending. The Ombudsman will be advised of the presentation of this report to this committee, and which will also be reported to Council in November. Chair, that's the summary of the report. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Is it your intention, Lisa, to go through the appendix and in any detail?
I can, Chair, if the covering report obviously provides a summary. I can go through the fact sheets, members, obviously. If you refer to page 12 in the report for the Ombudsman's letter, Appendix A sets out complaints received, and it gives a comparison then for Caerphilly County Borough Council with all other authorities. So you'll see there per 1,000 residents, 0.25% of complaints received related to Caerphilly County Borough Council. Appendix B then obviously sets out the breakdown of the complaints received by subject matter. Appendix C then refers to complaint outcomes. So there were a number of outcomes out of jurisdiction of the Ombudsman's remit. Some were premature, some were closed after initial consideration, and there were 3 then early resolution or voluntary settlements. Again, Appendix D then gives comparison figures regarding Ombudsman interventions with other authorities. Members will see how Caerphilly compares then in that table of other authorities. And the Code of Conduct complaints, which I just outlined then, are referred to in Appendix E, and the outcomes there are listed in that table. Chair, if there's anything specific, I'm happy to respond.
Thank you, Lisa. There's a hands up from Ms. Davis.
COVID-19, page 6, COVID-19, no complaints there. The other one that I was querying was there seemed to be an increase in planning and building control. Would this be down now to the new planning laws? And the other most that I'm interested is the training of officers. Over the past couple of years that I've sat on this committee, lots of things have been slipped through because of lack of training. And it states here that the officers have been taking part in training sessions. Do we know if all the officers have been trained? I think they were holding the last ones in October.
Yeah, Councillor Davis, all the 4 sessions now have been held, and I think it's in excess of 80, just in excess of 80 officers have been trained by the Ombudsman in relation to complaints handling.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Card, your hand's up. Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks. It's just on Appendix C, which is complaint outcomes. Am I right in thinking that the figures might include closures from previous years, but they're not necessarily reflective of the current year that's being reported on?
Did you catch the question?
It would be the complaint outcome, I believe, Mr. Card. So if the outcome occurred within this reporting period, then the outcome would be reported. So a complaint may have been referred to the Ombudsman in a previous year, but the outcome of the complaint may not have necessarily have been issued until a subsequent year.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions? Anyone would like to ask on the report? I can't see any hands up. Can I just ask Mr. Tranter and Lisa, how do you feel yourself that the complaint is never satisfactory? Any complaint is never satisfactory, but are we at a sort of reasonable working level complaint-wise compared with the rest of the country? Are we making progress, do you think?
Do you want me to? Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, in part of the reported process for complaints is that the complaints data is reported to the Governance and Audit Committee. So this committee receives the annual letter, but the actual consideration of complaints data goes to the Governance and Audit Committee. We introduced a new complaints policy on the 1st of April this year. We've got a complaints group of officers that work together, and we manage the data, obviously the complaints that come in. We analyse, manage and learn lessons from those complaints. So we report generally annually and 6 monthly on that data. And obviously we're working with the Ombudsman now on comparison data as well with other authorities, which has just started to be published. So, you know, we have proper processes in place to analyse and learn from the complaints we deal with.
Thank you, Lisa.
Could I just add something there, please, please, Chair, as well? Yeah. The other thing to appreciate, members, I think, is that the annual letter that you have before you are the complaints that reach the Ombudsman. So there are far more complaints made against the council than just those detailed in this report. Having complaints for an organisation of this size is you know, something that is going to happen, isn't it? We provide a huge array of services to the 180,000 plus people across the county borough. So it's not that surprising really that we have complaints. But I think the important thing about complaints is making sure, A, that the complainant is satisfied with how that's investigated and the outcome. And secondly, as an organisation, how we can learn from that complaint. Is there something in that complaint that we can learn from, and therefore that mistake is not made again? So provided we can meet and satisfy those two criteria, I think we will make progress. As Lisa says, there is a common complaints process throughout Wales that has been advocated by the Ombudsman. We've taken that on board, as have all the 21 other principal councils in Wales. And furthermore, we've gone through a high training regime of officers in dealing with complaints. So I think the situation is quite positive, as positive as it can be when an organisation faces complaints. But as I say, in my view, an organisation of this size, it's not that surprising that from time to time we do get complaints. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that reply there, Mr. Tranter. On the fact sheet, we're actually third in the whole of Wales in as far as complaints. I didn't realise that Flintshire had come second. So Cardiff was first with 96 and we are there with 46. So as the scale goes, I think it's an improvement recalling on a previous fact sheet.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Always nice to welcome an improvement. It brings us to the last item on the agenda. And hope everyone's had a chance to read through it so we know what it's all about. We've had a report of the Adjudication Panel for Wales. One particular complaint that went to the Ombudsman and then on to the Adjudication Panel. Lisa, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members will note the purpose of this report is to advise the Standards Committee of the outcome of the investigation by the Adjudication Panel for Wales relating to Councillor David Poole. Members may recall at its meeting in October 2019, they were made aware that Councillor Poole had made a self-referral to the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales in relation to alleged breaches of the Code of Conduct. And they were advised then that the Ombudsman had decided to investigate the referral. It was not appropriate to discuss the matter at that time, as the matter could have been referred back to the Standards Committee. However, members will be aware that subsequently on the 23rd of February 2021, the Adjudication Panel for Wales received a referral from the Ombudsman. The referral related to allegations made against Councillor Poole, which are set out in the report on page 20. As a result, a case tribunal was established and determined its adjudication via written representations at a meeting on the 28th of June this year, which was conducted by video. Members will note from the report that the case tribunal unanimously concluded that Councillor Poole ought to have been suspended from acting as a member of the authority as follows. In respect of his breaches of paragraph 6 and 7 of the Code, a period of 5 months, and in respect of his breaches of paragraph 11 and 14 of the Code, a period of 2 months, to run concurrently. The Tribunal also held that the authority and its Standards Committee should be notified accordingly. And the Case Tribunal also made a recommendation to the authority and its Standards Committee that the monitoring officer re-emphasises the requirement for members to register interests as and when they arise, and that this duty does not arise annually. Members will note from the report that they are asked to note the decision of the Adjudication Panel for Wales. Chair, that concludes a brief outline of the report. If members have any questions, we're happy to answer.
Are we up and running again? Everything okay? Right. Thank you. There are more pages outlining, well, not outlining, detailing the adjudication panel's discussions, which we can have a look at if necessary. But one or two things arise. Any questions arising from what we've heard from Lisa so far? Mr. Card?
Thank you. I note that the adjudication report said that the councillor ought to have been suspended, which seems to raise the question, why wasn't he suspended? And possibly that's something that we need to ask ourselves, because the report is directed to the outcome of the tribunal is directed at us.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Carter. I think that's just the way the report's written. It's the adjudication panel that makes the decision. So it's the adjudication panel that decided that Councillor Poole was to be suspended for 5 months. So there's no discretion in that as a standards committee. The matter went to the adjudication panel. So the Ombudsman investigated the complaint, the self-referral, decided that the self-referral was serious enough to go to the adjudication panel. Members will recall that's the highest tier of tribunal to deal with these matters in Wales. And the tribunal, on considering the Ombudsman's report and considering the representations made by Councillor Poole, decided that the Code of Conduct was breached and that he should be suspended for 5 months. So it was a decision of the adjudication panel that suspended Councillor Poole for 5 months. I hope that's just cleared up that for you. Thank you. So I'm not sure whether other members or members listening caught the question. Yeah, I was just, yeah, okay. So anybody who didn't hear what the chair said then, the chair's question was, when did the suspension start? So the suspension started on the date that the adjudication panel gave its decision, which I think was the 20th of June, and the suspension will be concluded on the 20th of November. So on the 20th of November, Councillor Poole can resume his duties as a County Borough Councillor of this council.
Ms. Davis?
When does he come back? The one thing that concerns me in this matter, I mean, it's quite a serious matter as leader of the council as well, is the failure of Councillor Poole to respond to the letters sent to him from the Ombudsman. He failed to respond 3 times. 2 months later, he responds. So I think he let himself down there. There's no explanation, I can't see it in this report anyway, that he's explained why he didn't respond. So I think that's a bit, considering how serious it was. We know that it's listed, there's no financial implications involved, but in the time that he had these shares, and he subsequently bought more shares, it's quite mind-boggling reading it. For a man in his experience as a councillor, as a leader, did he make any money at all? And did he have to repay any any interest that he might have acquired? Sorry.
Okay, I'll try my best to deal with that. Whether Councillor Poole made any profit from these shares, I think is absolutely irrelevant and irrelevant to the consideration of the adjudication panel. So I just think that's irrelevant. But the shareholdings were relatively small. You can see them in the report. So we're not talking about major sums of money here. Whether Councillor Poole responded to correspondence from the adjudication panel, well, from the report, it seems that initially he didn't, but he finally did. Now, I don't know the reasons for that, but I think as a Standards Committee, you have heard that he did eventually respond to the correspondence from the adjudication panel. And furthermore, don't forget, I think this is entirely relevant, we were in the middle of a pandemic at the time that this investigation was ongoing. So I think everyone, or the great majority of us, was in a state of flux. So I think that probably was a factor in any delay in responding to the allegations. As I said, I don't know. That's just my sort of reading and perhaps offering an explanation to the question given by Mrs. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Sander. Mr. Carr, do you have a hand up?
Thank you. Yes, I'm sure we've all read it, but a factor in mitigation that the tribunal found was that the councillor in January 2019 tried to register an interest and was advised that he didn't have to. And then 6 months later, he was prompted by the Deputy Monitoring Officer to amend the Register of Interests. And I'm wondering why there is such a change of view over that 6 month period. What prompted that?
Lisa can deal with the prompting, bearing in mind she's the Deputy Monitoring Officer, but I will certainly deal with the question from Mr. Card about the registration of interests. This is quite a technical matter. I became aware of Councillor Poole's shareholdings when he changed his register of interests. On looking at the register of interests, I advised Councillor Poole that there was no need for him to register those interests. And I did that, and I'll now turn to the Code of Conduct because we are talking about the Code of Conduct. I did that because paragraph 10.2a, subparagraph 4 says this, okay? It says that you must regard yourself as having a personal interest in any business of your authority if it relates to or is likely to affect, and subparagraph 4 is the relevant paragraph, any corporate body which has a place of business or land in your authority's area, and I emphasize that, and in which you have a beneficial interest in a class of securities of that body that exceeds the nominal value of £25,000 or 1/100th of the total issued share capital of that body. My reading of that paragraph, and the adjudication panel report bears this out, is that Councillor Poole's shareholding does not come within that paragraph, and therefore there is no need for him to register his shareholding in the upfront register. So just to be clear for members what the upfront register is, paragraph 10.2a of the code sets out various paragraphs in the code where, if they are appropriate to that member, the member needs to put those in his or her upfront register. Because this shareholding was less than £25,000 in value, and certainly 1/100th of the total issued share capital of that company is a massive multi-nat company. And furthermore, the shareholding was not within the boundaries of the county borough, he did not come in within that paragraph. So that's why I advised Councillor Poole that there was no need for him to register it in his upfront register. Now, so that's his upfront register. When he was at the meeting in April, Councillor Poole quite rightly declared an interest in the matter. And he declared an interest in the matter under paragraph 10.2c. And I'll just remind members what 10.2c says. So we'll go back. You must regard yourself as having a personal interest in any business of your authority if a decision upon it might reasonably be regarded as affecting your well-being or financial position or that of a person with whom you live or any person with whom you have a close personal association. So, if he was in a meeting where IQE was discussed, and he was in April, he quite rightly declared an interest, and he declared that interest under paragraph 10.2c. 10.2c does not need to be within his upfront register. It's an interest that is recorded within the minutes of the meeting, and it's recorded by this council as a member declaring an interest at a meeting. This is quite technical, but I think it's important, and it's important to appreciate the difference between the interest and the 10.2a and 10.2c. So whilst that was a long and technical answer, I hope that was of assistance to members. Perhaps now, Chair, with your discretion, Lisa can deal with this phrase prompting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have anything to add really, other than what this report says. I prompted Councillor Poole in June 2019. I don't have the information to hand, but obviously this information was presented to the adjudication panel. Councillor Poole updated his register, which was initialled and then added to the council's website.
Thank you. So just to get everything clear in my mind anyway, there are two aspects to this. One is the register of interest, which has got nothing to do with meetings at all. It's the annual register that people have to declare. But when it comes to a meeting, you then have to declare an interest in that particular meeting. So the report that we've received doesn't really make clear what was what there. There seemed to be conflicting advice from the monitoring officer and the deputy monitoring officer, but it wasn't conflicting advice. There's two different pieces of advice. Does anyone want to ask any questions about that further?
Before there's any further questions, Chair, if I could just say that the upfront register of interest is more than an annual registration, okay? If a member has a new interest to put in that upfront register, they must notify me within 28 days of the change or the new interest. So if you like, it's an ongoing duty that they must keep me updated and advised on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Santa. So it's Mrs. Davis?
I just want to end by my questions. Well, it's not a question. I read the paragraph at the bottom of page 33. Because in all fairness, everyone was talking about what was going on. I find it sad that it actually says, through the interview process, he had shown no real insight into his wrongdoing and/or acceptance of guilt. And this is the worst part. In the latter stages of the process leading to this decision, he had failed to engage with the adjudication panel. It's quite blasé, really, isn't it, for something? I mean, it was serious, and I find it quite sad. But that last paragraph. Thank you, Chair.
the adjudication panel decided that he was serious and decided that he should be suspended for 7 months. The suspension has taken place, and it's a salutary lesson to all concerned. All councillors and anyone attending a meeting must declare. Otherwise, but can I ask one more question? Sorry, the actual process of where the complaint goes to the Ombudsman. Councillor Poole volunteered himself. What was the technical term now? He reported himself to the Ombudsman.
Yeah.
What would prompt someone to do that rather than someone else complain about his or her behaviour?
The technical term for it, Chair, is a self-referral. And if you like, a self-referral is where a member has maybe some doubts, wants some clarification about their actions, and rather than perhaps wait for a complaint, to go to the Ombudsman direct to seek that clarification. So that was the reason that Councillor Poole made a self-referral. So it happens from time to time with members, and my own view on that is I think that's a good idea. That's to be supported.
Thank you once again. Are there any further comments or questions that we can usefully take at this point? Councillor Price.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What Mr. Tranter have just said is quite true. This have happened to me, but I referred myself as well, because you're unsure. Sometimes you're unsure, and you do get, how can I say, people telling you one thing, somebody telling you another thing, and you really don't know where you're going. But I did the same, and I don't think there's anything wrong in that. I think it's a very, very brave thing to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Yes, we don't know what circumstances appertained at the time, and it is indeed a brave thing to do. Mr. Brunt.
Yes. I was just going to say, if this was a legal system, a court of law, then anything you say like that would be taken into mitigation and your sentence would be reduced. So why wasn't that taken into account? He's basically pleading guilty to doing something wrong, or asking them to investigate it, and they still give him 7 months.
Well, I suppose perhaps it was mitigation. Perhaps he would have had life imprisonment otherwise.
If I could say something there, please, Chair. Don't forget, members, that the suspension was for 5 months. It was for 5 months. Yeah, 2 were concurrent. Yeah, 2 were concurrent. Yeah.
Mr. Card.
Thank you. I understand that the Welsh Audit Office wrote to the Council in 2019 concerning disclosure of members' interests based around those involved with the city deal. And Christina Harry told City Deal at a minuted meeting that the council had dealt with the issues formally and robustly. That was in October 2019. So I don't know quite where that sits with reports to the Standards Committee, of which there were 2 meetings subsequently to that. Seems to me that possibly the Wales Audit Office were actually the vehicle that prompted the change of the registering of interests. Perhaps the enforcement officer could comment on that.
Yep. Okay. I think it's just a question of timing, isn't it? The Welsh Audit did a piece of work with the City Deal, organisation about members' interests, and don't forget the self-referral done by Councillor Poole was done in September. It was made in September. Okay, so that is before Mrs. Harry, our Chief Executive, made that response to the City Deal. And then in the intervening period, that self-referral was investigated by the Ombudsman. A report was prepared, the adjudication panel considered it, and the matter is now concluded. So I think the timeline there is quite important.
Going through this in order to see that there are lessons perhaps that could be learned. We've given it a fairly good airing. Is there any last comments now before we leave? Mr. Carr, do you wish to respond? Do you see you've got your hand up still? Well, you're on mute, Mr. Card, I'm afraid.
Thanks for spotting that, Chair. I just would have thought that a letter from the Wales Audit Office concerned about members' interests, which I would have thought that would have been mentioned to the Standards Committee. Yes, that's why we're here. Thank you.
I'm not quite sure what you're insinuating there, Mr. Card, but don't forget that I did advise the Standards Committee that there was an investigation being undertaken. So you were aware about it. Obviously, I can't give too much information at that stage before the investigation report's received.
Thank you, Mrs. Hunter. Mrs. Davis again.
Oh, I don't know. There we go. Sorry, I'm very sorry. But I will confirm that we were informed that an investigation was taking place in the last meeting that we held as a group.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Davis. No further comments? Thank you. We're only required to note it. We need to take no further action ourselves. So if we are all agreed that that's been noted, we have noted it. We are recorded as having noted it, or whatever we have to do. Now, there are no further items on the agenda. So I'm just about to close the meeting. Thank you one and all for being patient with those of us who don't click the mouse at the right time or poke the screen at the right time. Thank you to the technical staff who have guided us through it. And I'm sure we'll be so much better next time should there be one.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Tranter.
With that, I declare the meeting.